Thank you, Omaha. It is great to be here with you this morning. You know, usually when I'm on stage, I'm talking about my companies or my products. And today, you're in for something new. This is the first time I've ever given a talk, nothing about my companies, nothing about my products. This is me telling you stories from being an entrepreneur. And we're going to talk about the subject of what motivates an entrepreneur. This may seem kind of obvious, but there's various motivations that an entrepreneur has. At least I've had various motivations over time. And I'm going to share those with you, and I'm going to tie in some stories about building startups that hopefully those of you that are entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs will get some tips and tricks from my stories. So, to start with, about me. I'm from Portland, Oregon. It's not quite the cool hip town that you read about. At least it wasn't when I was there young. It was a fairly simple town. And I come from a very simple background. In fact, I'm the first person to go to college from both sides of the family. And my story begins with my mom. You see, my mother in this picture is 15 years old, and she had me the next year by herself. And she says, and if she was here today, she'd tell you this was actually a good thing for her because she was in an abusive home. And by getting pregnant and having to move out and get her own apartment, it forced her to get away from a bad environment and allowed her that freedom. Well, we were poor, and we were on welfare, government assistance. Thank you, taxpayers. The food stamps kept us fed and helped pay our rent. But my mother had problems paying the rent. And I remember being 5 years old, and the landlord came to the door, and he had a piece of paper in his hand, and he was very upset. And it was clear this has happened before. And my mom closed the door, and she crumbled onto the floor, and she cried. As a little boy watching your mother cry because we're about to be evicted, it was a very, very indelible impression on me. And I carried it. I carried it for many years. And I made a decision very early on that I wasn't going to be poor. That I was going to provide for my mother and provide for my family someday, and I would never be poor. That's my primary motivation. So, building a startup is hard, and you've heard many stories about how challenging and difficult it can be. I can't possibly understate the difficulty of building startups. I'm on my fourth venture-backed startup, and it's hard. But there are some things that we can learn about ourselves to help us in this journey. And knowing what motivates you is one of those key things. The Gallup organization did a study a few years back and trying to find out what actually is the tools that we need to be successful. What are our weaknesses and what are our strengths? And a lot of the management courses and leadership courses are about how do you develop people's weaknesses so they can, if you're not good at math, you learn some math skills. If you're not good at writing, you learn how to write. And we've developed these tools to help us build these certain muscles so that we can be fully developed and fully capable. But what the authors of the book Strengths Finders came up with from this Gallup research is that you have better chances of success if you focus on your strengths. You identify what you're good at. You identify what can help you to be successful. And I think motivation is one of those key tools that we can use towards success. There was this ancient inscription on the walls in Delphi, Greece. And it basically says, know thyself. And Socrates and Plato, they wrote about this inscription. It doesn't exist anymore. In fact, it didn't even exist for them. They had heard about it. And in the writings over the years, from Plato on up, there's been lots of interpretations about what this know thyself means. And sadly, the early interpretation of this really meant, know thyself, do not usurp a position which is not thine by right. In other words, for many, many years, we've been taught to stay in our place in society. Don't try to move up. Don't try to get out of your caste. And that has been a major part of human existence since really the beginning until just recent decades. Do you have entrepreneurs that can actually go and create things and not be held down by a limited definition of know thyself? So I'd like to posit that My interpretation of know thyself means know who you are, know what motivates you, so that you can fulfill your dreams. So 3 different types of motivations, broad categories that I've come up with, which I've looked at it myself over the years, and I've seen in my friends. I'll talk about these, and I'll share some stories about startup life. So you've already heard about one motivation, and that is to make money. And without a doubt, that was my early motivation. Making money, of course, has all kinds of ranges to it. It can be the simple, I want to provide shelter for my family, I want to have food, right? The basic Maslow hierarchy needs. And then, of course, it can get, a different end of the make money spectrum. I want to have luxury and comfort. And I make no judgments on any of these values, by the way, any of these motivations. It's what they are. It's important to know what motivates you, right? It's not a judgment. I have friends that, they've made a lot of money, and they're motivated by money. And when they're nice enough to let me ride in their private jets, I don't judge them. I don't criticize them. I take full advantage of it. It's wonderful. So there's a spectrum. And the challenge, of course, is knowing where you fit on that spectrum, if this is a motivator of yours. And there's some tricks and there's some traps to having money as a motivator. So I had a boss years ago. He was the VP of sales of the company. And he said, Jason, you're a great salesman. You're doing pretty good on commissions. And I think that you should drive a luxury car. You should drive a BMW. And, I had a simple economy car. And he said, look, I'm going to pay for the down payment of the lease, $3,000. He was going to pay that, and the car would be mine. I just had to pay a monthly $750 lease. You get it? Right? He's the head of sales. I'm a commissioned sales rep. Right? He wanted me to have to earn the commission to pay for that expensive car. It's a classic trick. It's a trick that many sales managers have used over the years. You give luxury goods, you give your employees fancy jewelry and watches, things to make them want luxury. Give them fancy vacations, golfing vacations. You want them to want money, because if they want money, then they will be better salespeople. Well, money is important. And in the world of startups, it's definitely important. And people will often come to me at Founders Den, the incubator that I created in San Francisco, and they'll say, hey, I have a great idea for a startup. Let me run it by you. And sure enough, they'll tell me the pitch, and there's some amazing ideas, and I love hearing ideas. And then at the end of that pitch, they'll often say to me, so, who do you think will finance this? Who can you introduce me to? And I think this is a bit of a mistake, because startups don't need money, right? Startups need momentum. They need something to move into motion. Building a company takes money. 2 different things. So I'll often encourage entrepreneurs, try to get a prototype going, try to get maybe a couple of customers. Before you try to raise money, try to get something in motion. Then raise money, and it'll be a lot cheaper money too. So, raising money. I've done this a few times. In fact, the first time I did it, I had a small company, and we wanted to grow. It was just a little regional internet service provider. And I was about ready to go to Silicon Valley, Sand Hill Road, and do the whole pitch to VCs. And I went to a backyard barbecue. My wife was in a part of a nonprofit, and a bunch of these nice older people were gathering to have a barbecue. And I went along to be supportive, but it wasn't really my community. And at some point, this older couple, they asked me what I was doing. And usually, as an entrepreneur, you have like a 60-second elevator pitch, right? And you just lay it out there. Well, I sized up these 2 people. I was like, I don't really want to go into it. I gave them like a 5-second elevator pitch. But they were excited. And they were like, wow, that's really cool. We wanted to know about this internet thing. This is quite a while ago. And the gentleman says, hey, I have a commercial real estate company, and my team has tried to understand the internet. Could you come by and talk to us about what you're doing? He's a nice guy. I enjoyed the conversation, and I agreed. So next week, I went to his office, big office, and he had his whole management team together in the boardroom, and they just let me talk, and they asked me questions about the internet, and they asked me questions about my company. And afterwards, the CFO came up to me and he asked me more questions about numbers and what I hope to do to grow the company. The next week, they wired $1 million into my bank account. And it was game-changing, right? This welfare kid from Portland, Oregon, right, that just, a year earlier had been making, a very low salary and hardly could dream of being a startup executive entrepreneur. This was a big deal, $1 million. And it enabled me to build a nationwide broadband ISP that I sold a couple years later. So raising money is important. All right, on to motivation number 2. Be famous, right? It's a motivation, and there's a range on this one as well, right? Because the range can be as simple as, I just want to show that former boss of mine that didn't appreciate me and didn't recognize my contributions. I want to show him that I'm smart and I'm capable and I can do great things. Or I want to show that girl that turned me down for prom that, she could have been with an entrepreneur that's successful. It could be that small, or it could be bigger. You want to be a rock star, right? You want to be famous, right? And there's going to be some great famous entrepreneurs, I think, later today and tomorrow here. And it's a motivation, and there's nothing wrong with it. Again, I don't judge any of these, but it's important to know where do you want to be in that, right? If you just want to show your tiger mom or your overbearing dad that, you could be successful, if that's a motivation, that's fine, right? And if you want to be, the greatest entrepreneur, the next Steve Jobs, that's fine too. Knowing what you want and what you need to motivate you. So, startup life. Largely about doing things that aren't that fun. And it's important to know this because as a CEO, as a startup founder, you end up having to do things that just aren't that great. In fact, Scott McNealy, the CEO of Sun Microsystems, told Jeff Jordan when he became president of eBay, he said, look, your job as president is to do the yucky jobs, to do the yucky things, so that your employees can do the fun stuff and be productive. And that is absolutely the case. So it's a tough job. In fact, it's like being a used car salesman, right? you have to sell every single day, right? You are selling to customers, you're selling to your employees, you're selling to investors, you are selling. If you don't like to sell, you have no business being an entrepreneur. It is all about selling every single day. And as a salesman, you have to be a champion. You have to be a star. You have to get people excited, right? You have to get people to follow you. You have to be a leader, right? You need those employees to follow you. You want customers to get on board your product, your service. You need investors to get behind you. So it's important to know that you need that kind of energy, that type of passion as a leader, as an entrepreneur. All right, on to the third and last motivation. Make a difference, right? So it's very important to distinguish this from the other two. Make a difference for the sake of making a difference. You want to build, you want to create, not for the money, not for the fame. That may come, but this is a more pure motivation, and it's a beautiful thing. And some of my favorite people just love to build stuff. I was on the campus of Purdue University a couple years ago. My wife went to college there. And I was walking along the campus and looked up at a brand new, gorgeous building, really a whole school on the campus. And I saw my friend's name, this building. And the funny thing about this is my friend Rusty, I know him and his wife. We volunteer in children's ministry at our church. And they're just wonderful people, very humble, very simple. And so, I didn't know they had that kind of money to donate to school. And B, I was a little surprised to see their name on it because not the kind of people that are flashy. So I go back to San Francisco and I see Rusty and I say, hey, Rusty, I was on Purdue's campus last weekend and I walked by this performing visual arts school and his head kind of lowers and he kind of smiles a little bit. He's clearly embarrassed. And he says, hey, Jason, let me tell you the deal. The deal is when you donate to a nonprofit and to a university, they actually ask you to put your name on the building. They want you to do that because it actually inspires other people to give and donate. And so against his wishes, they put his name on the building. To which I then said, well, the next time, you reluctantly have to put your name on a building, you can put my name on the building. So, wide range of doing things that make a difference, right? Things in biotechnology, health sciences, very clear benefits to humankind. Information technology, we focus on productivity, maybe entertainment, different ways of contributing. There's a wide range that you can make a difference by building a startup. There's two kinds of startups, really. There's startups that make a product that is better than what is out there today, which could be something totally new, or they do something cheaper. And there's really no other categories that I've seen. So for example, Uber. What does Uber do? Uber took the problem of procuring transportation and made it really simple and easy, number one. And number two, they reduced the friction of payment, right? You ever been in one of those taxis where there's no credit card machine and you have to have them take you to an ATM machine, or you have to run into the hotel and get money from somebody? They eliminated that problem, a major improvement on transportation. Making something cheaper, on the other hand, something like Coursera, right? So, unlike Peter Thiel, I'm a big fan of 4-year college. I think it's important. I think it's a great experience. But it's very expensive, very expensive. And companies like Coursera are finding a way to take that very expensive education and make it available to more people for a much smaller price. It's a great business model. All right, one more thing here. I've talked about entrepreneurs. Well, there's really two kinds of entrepreneurs. In fact, I say entrepreneur and intrapreneur. And I think some of you are entrepreneurs. That is, you want to build your own company from scratch. You have the courage, you know what motivates you, you're going to go do it. There's some of you that work for companies, but you have ideas, and you want to build, you want to create. Maybe you have some of these motivations that I've talked about. And I think it's important to understand the value and the importance of the intrapreneur, because not all of us have the desire to go out there and want to start something from scratch and wear all those hats that I mentioned and be a salesman every single day. Maybe you work for a big company and you have salespeople in your organization, right? You have HR, you have IT, right? You have all these resources. And I think there's unsung heroes in this room that work for companies that are entrepreneurs. You're just inside of a larger organization. I think that's a great thing. I think that we need to give more of an opportunity to give a hand to those entrepreneurs that are in big organizations that are making a difference and creating great products and services. So I had the opportunity to do this. I sold my first company, and I traveled around the world. So as you can guess, after I finished college, I didn't travel. I got a job. Remember, money motivated. Get a job, get an apartment, get a car. So I didn't get that chance after college. So here I was in my 30s. I put on a backpack and I traveled around the world. And it's kind of funny being like the older guy staying in youth hostels, especially when you just sold a company. But it was great. It was a great culture. I really enjoyed it. I came back, and my friend said, "Okay, what's your next company?" I didn't have one in mind. I honestly didn't have an idea that I thought was big enough and that I was excited enough about. So I went to work for Dolby Labs, and Dolby is this global entertainment technology company. And I was basically an entrepreneur brought in to build a new business for the company. In their 40-plus year existence, they'd never actually had a venture. It's always been sort of the core company, core products. But they brought me in, and they gave me all these resources, right? I had again, the HR department and the IT and a global brand, right, with offices around the world. I could go visit with any consumer electronics company in the world. They'd take my meeting because of Dolby, because of the brand. And it was a really neat thing to have all those resources. And they were nice enough to let me have my own separate company. We had a little board of directors. It was Dolby executives on the board, but it was our own company. And it was fun. And I did this for 6 years. And of course, I hope that they'd let me spin it off as a separate company someday, but Dolby went public on the New York Stock Exchange, and my little business became a $200 million revenue generator, and they didn't let me spin it off. So my friends were like, hey, thought you were an entrepreneur. You've been at this Dolby place for a long time. When are you going to get out and build something? And finally, I did. And when I left Dolby, I started a startup with a friend of mine. And I was working out of my house. And he actually lived in Dallas, so we were quite far away. And it's by myself. And, the first week after I left Dolby, it was kind of cool. Like, I got my dog, I got a fridge full of food. This is great. But then I looked around, I'm like, where is everybody? This isn't so fun. I'm by myself. So I got a few friends together, and I created this co-working space called Founders Den. And it was largely for myself. I wanted to be around cool entrepreneurs making cool things and have a community. And it's been fun. And I've now built a couple of companies while there. And now my new company, August, is actually in the same building. We're across the hall. Took over to the half of the building. It's fun to be part of that community. And it's fun to be around people that motivate me and inspire me. So, to the point of when is the right time to start a company, right? If you want to be an entrepreneur, if you're thinking about quitting your job, which I don't recommend. I recommend staying at your job as long as you can, by the way, right? Back to the resources of the big company. Use those resources while you work on your idea, right? Use the company's travel budget to go visit those customers, build those relationships that you might be able to use for yourself someday. Get to know your coworkers. Look around you, right? These could be your co-founders someday, right? Take full advantage of the resources of the company you're working for today so that when you decide to take the plunge to start your own company, you'll have some resources. So when is the right time? So I call it Rule 0 for startups. My Rule 0 is never start a company. Never throw in everything. Quit your job, start a company. Unless you are so passionate about it, you're so excited about your startup that you're laying in bed at night and you can't sleep. Because if you don't have that level of passion, that level of excitement, you're probably not going to have the energy necessary, the passion necessary for building a startup, right? 99% of all startups fail. 99% fail. So you need a lot of passion, a lot of energy, a lot of endurance to build a startup. So that's when. All right, so we talked about motivations. We've talked about what drives us to become entrepreneurs. I think you have an idea what might drive you to build something, whether it's where you're at today, inside the company you're in, or to quit, perhaps, and start your own company. Knowing what motivates you as a tool, it's an asset that you can use to motivate you. And it may change over time. It's changed for me over time. I'm a little less motivated about money now. It's easy to say, of course, when you have a little bit of money. I'm trying to change the world. In my new company, I hope to do that. But the time to start a company has never been better. Right? Our society has evolved. This know thyself, right, has evolved. And we support people that dream big. And the statistics show that right now is a great time to start a company. And I highly encourage anybody to do it within an organization or on their own. There's no reason why not you. Thank you.